me just ask you, there are very clear lines on either side of this negotiation. The Americans want to discuss the end of the nuclear weapons program. The Israelis want to discuss the end of the nuclear weapons program, the ballistic missile program, and the terror proxy program. And the Iranians are saying that they're only willing to discuss the issue of enrichment. How are these two sides, the Americans and the Iranians, going to bridge that gap?
Well, Benjamin, I don't think they're going to be able to bridge that gap. And I think what you're going to see is a period of time during which there will be no progress. President Trump always tries to get a deal first, but of course, he has to deal with the intransigence of the theocratic dictatorship in Tehran. And I think it will become clear to him that he's not getting anywhere. And just as he did previously when he gave them 60 days before the United States joined in that very successful IDF 12-day campaign, I think that's how this is going to play out. Iranian intransigence based on the nature of that theocratic dictatorship in Tehran, followed by, I would anticipate, military action against really everything you named, their missile program, their nuclear program, and I think also some of the tools of repression that they have used most recently to murder tens of thousands of their own people.
So assuming that that military threat that I talked about is a credible military threat, and it sounds like you're saying it's a very credible military threat, what's it likely to look like? There are a range of options in front of the president, obviously. Most people say that he is not seeking to put boots on the ground in Iran, but between a blockade and that outcome of boots on the ground, his options are vast. Where do you see this going?
I think it's going to be a range of capabilities that they could be targeted. So if the president does decide to use military force, I think at the top of the list is any of the latent nuclear-related, missile-related capabilities. What still is there? We've seen them already try to reconstitute military targets associated with the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, the Basij, their ability maybe to communicate with one another and to share data to repress their own people. But I think other targets could be economic, Benjamin, associated with the cash flow that the regime needs for its priorities, which are to reconstitute those programs and then also to reconstitute their terrorist proxies and militia proxies in the region that have been dealt such severe blows by the IDF in recent months.
So one of the things I know that Israel wants to see is the avoidance of releasing any of those sanctions in the event that a deal is struck, for precisely the reason you alluded to keep the pressure on the regime. You spoke about the success of Israel's combined strikes on Iran that were then joined by the Americans. Do you think there's a scenario in which the Israelis would join this strike? And are we looking to topple this regime? Is that the outcome that we're now primed to bring about?
Well, Benjamin, I could foresee maybe initially the IDF, sitting it out for a moment. But of course, when you can conduct these strikes, Iran has the opportunity to respond. They still have some missile capabilities, drone capabilities. They've threatened a regional war if there are these strikes. So I could see them using those capabilities against their Arab neighbors and against Israel. And then I think that's when Israel would certainly join in the campaign. I think, Benjamin, what we all need to see is a change in that regime in Iran. I mean, after they've murdered tens of thousands of people, how can anyone think otherwise than that? And this is for, obviously, our security, the security of the region. But hey, how about the security of the Iranian people? The people and the country have tremendous promise, tremendous potential, but they've just had the life choked out of them since 1979. And so, I think that it ought to be the objective to help incentivize and support those who are calling for a change in the nature of that government. Of course, that's going to be up to the Iranian people. And what's sad about it is, as weak as the Iranian regime is, they just have to be stronger than any organized opposition. And they're quite good at murdering unarmed people in the streets.
Now, you, of course, know President Trump to a degree that very few do. I want to ask you, not from a political point of view, but just more of a policy point of view, there's obviously a strong voice within that party that is isolationist in nature. Do you think that they are having success in staying the president's hand thus far? Or do you think that this delay is merely a result of him needing to steadily bring the force build-up about that he seems to have now come very close to completing?
You know, President Trump is not inflexible in terms of his mindset. And so what he will do is consult with a broad range of people. Many of them will say, hey, if you do this, it's going to be a major regional war. Don't do it. They'll highlight what they see as maybe the prospect of another long war like the war in Iraq. And this is what animates a lot of those who are sort of neo-isolationists. And they see, as a result, the Middle East mainly as a mess to be avoided. They also don't want the United States to fight other people's fights. And so what you'll hear some of these people say is, oh, hey, don't let Israel drag the United States into a war. They'll use that kind of an argument. And so he will hear those arguments because those arguments come in large measure from some of his most staunch supporters. But President Trump knows the problem with Iran. He knows that Iran has been fighting a proxy war against who they call the Great Satan, the United States, for over 4 decades. And he used to say to me, Benjamin, hey, General, everywhere I look, there's a problem in the Middle East, Iran's behind it. So he knows the nature of the regime. He understands their permanent hostility to the United States, Israel, and their Arab neighbors, by the way, who they've engaged in this strategy of perpetuating a sectarian civil war to keep their Arab neighbors weak so they can establish this land bridge to the Mediterranean, build the ring of fire around Israel, the ring of fire that they lit on October 7th, 2023. And then, of course, they reaped the whirlwind from that and now have been exposed as a profoundly weak dictatorship.
I know you're not a betting man, but again, given your personal knowledge of President Trump, were you to be one, would you bet that he is going to strike, or is he going to reach a deal?
I would bet that he is going to strike, and that would be based on President Trump's character, but also, as I mentioned, the intransigence, the ideology of the theocratic dictatorship in Iran.
General, let me ask you one other question, if you would go with me on this. I'd like you to put the lie, if you're of that view, to the isolationist wing within the party that says that the US should stand back from everything that's going on in the Middle East. Put the lie to that. Tell us why such a theory is just not practical in the modern moment, and why doing so would be to the detriment of the United States.
Well, Benjamin, of course, we know that today that threats that develop abroad can only be dealt with at an exorbitant cost once they reach your shores, right? And of course, Israel has this mentality already because you're surrounded, by hostile organizations from Hezbollah to Hamas to Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and with Iran behind so much of that. So in the United States, with these great moats of the Atlantic and Pacific, sometimes we forget that. But hey, just go back to 9/11, right? September 11th, 2001. We knew that Al-Qaeda was a threat. We fired a few cruise missiles and called it a day, and then we suffered the consequences of the most destructive terrorist attack in history. So I think we have to recognize that we don't have to solve the world's problems. The United States can't do it, right? We're not going to conciliate the furies of the Middle East. But disengagement from these complex problem sets allows your enemies to marshal strength, to plan, prepare, train, and then execute operations against you and your interests abroad. And I would say, Benjamin, the United States does prioritize the security of Israel as well. The president understands that and understands that really for there to be progress toward peace in the Middle East, Iran has to transform into a new form of government that again ends this permanent hostility to the United States, Israel, and its Arab neighbors.
Well, General McMaster, thank you so much for joining us today. I hope to have you back on Opinionated in the very near future, and I wish Godspeed to the men and women in uniform serving beneath the flag of the great United States of America. Thank you, General.
Thank you, Benjamin.